Hello. Thank you. We were going to try to do this before the IFA, and we got busy and things got on our schedule. And so thank you so much for making yourself available post IFA.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed it. It was my first time participating as a moderator, I guess it was.
Yeah.
In a session in the IFA. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm very grateful for Eric Belk, who has been doing this for several years and was much more comfortable with it than I was. It was really interesting, and it helped a lot. It helped a lot that our sponsor brought an open bar to our session. So I think that really worked in our favor. I'm very grateful. For sure.
You got to have priorities, right?
Made us very popular.
There you go. So fantastic. Let's get back to that senior roundtable here in just a little bit, but tell me a little bit about your journey. Tell me a little bit about 5-Star. Obviously, if you look at your CV or your resume, you see that you spent quite some time in Greece. How did you make it to the States, back to the States? I love, there's a difference in factoring and commercial finance in the States and in Europe. Not as much as there used to be. But if you have any kind of stories in that regard, so tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into the IFA.
Yeah, so I'm an American citizen. So I was born here, but we did move to Greece when I was 11. So I lived there for 30 years. Approximately, approximately 12 of which I was working in factoring in banks there. I headed the international factoring division for the Bank of Cyprus, and then I worked for HSBC Receivables Finance for 5 years, heading the global department there. It's funny that you mentioned the differences. It's legally the difference is that it's an assignment in Europe, whereas it's a purchase in the U.S. But there are more subtle differences as well. I will say that factoring and trade finance is generally much more of a streamlined banking product, not a separate product or an alternative product like it is here. It's a very mainstream product, as is purchase order financing. We all did that through, even at HSBC, through the commercial division of the bank. Generally, I would say that financing in Europe is probably more structured from a trade perspective. And obviously, technology has substantially enhanced that capability. So they've also moved into supply chain finance. They did that a lot earlier than we did here in the US, and they're structuring it very much as a reverse factoring structure, which I think is very much the case and tendency for our market as well. So we did decide to come to the US at the end of 2012 because of the financial crisis. And we decided, I'm originally from Omaha, Nebraska. We thought that Denver was a better place for my background, which was in international finance. And I started out by working at Zions Bancorp, so Vector Bank and National Bank of Arizona factoring. And then I started cooperating with community banks here to set up business credit divisions for them. So I'm currently at 5-Star Bank. I've been here for 2 years, a little over 2 years. Actually, no, almost 2 years. And I've been tasked with setting up a business credit division for them. It is a locally owned and operated, very entrepreneurial bank. We have, obviously, we have our CRE business, but we have a lot of alternative and other banking products. We have a great SBA division. It makes me very happy to be able to be a part of something that's part of the community and contributes to the community as well, and the growth of the local business community here.
You know, when I started in commercial finance and asset-based lending and factoring back in the 80s, so this was pre-internet, the impression was, here in the States, factoring and even asset-based lending at some level was kind of, in a way, looked down upon in many industries, right? That was for retail, that was for people that would break your knees, that kind of thing. And yet in Europe, the evolution and the sophistication was such that form of financing wasn't anything actually looked counterfeit. It wasn't anything. It was quite normal in terms of actually providing working capital. Do I have that right? Was that the way it was, at least when I started?
Yes, absolutely. And I do remember, like, even in Europe, we very much had those conversations of the stigma, the potential stigma. What are my customers going to think? Not so much anymore, of course. But I will tell you, like, in different countries, you have different names, and everybody has their euphemisms. And the UK is invoice discounting, and but in Europe, by and large, the word and the term factoring is very well accepted and very well received. I believe it's very much a streamlined product anymore. Virtually any operating line will be on some sort of trade finance structure, and they're very accustomed and comfortable with the terms of factoring. I think there's a little bit still here in the U.S., and I think that's getting better as there's more of I think it's competition, but I also think it's more banks getting involved in the bringing the terms to more reasonable or to resemble bank lines more. You see that happening, not that it's the same, but there's that effort or that tendency in the market. So I think it's much better received than it used to be. And I think that was a global thing. It wasn't just here.
And the internet's got to help, right? Because the dissemination of information, the opportunity for people to actually see that at least from the state's perspective, we don't go around with baseball bats and knocking people's kneecaps.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
So what a challenge from going to 5-star, and if you kind of look at it, basically the charge was, hey, set up a business credit commercial finance group, and you've been doing that for almost 2 years. Have you had any time to rest or sleep at all?
Not a lot. But I love what I do, and I obviously I come from very big banks and corporate environments. I thoroughly enjoy being in a community bank. It just feels, when you do factoring for a long time, you can relate to this, I'm sure, as everybody can. You really get that rewarding feeling when you start these companies from their very first invoices, and then they grow and they become bank clients, and it's just such a proud process and such a great, like, really rewarding process. Being part of a community bank just amplifies that, because I'm at one end of the continuum. Sometimes I'm at the higher end if we're doing supply chain finance, but just being able to be a part of that puzzle to make sure that you're able to offer solutions for all sorts of companies, regardless of size or where they are in the growth cycle. So I really enjoy, obviously, the flexibility. There's no arguing with that compared to being with bigger banks. But just being part of that effort just was really rewarding to me.
Yeah. So when you came back to the States, how did you say, okay, the Denver area is where I want to be? Had you been in Denver before, exposed it? Well, then how did you decide to?
I will say a lot of people from Nebraska live in Denver now.
Really?
Well, not a lot of people that are from Omaha live in Omaha. Denver is probably one of the number one locations where. So we have family and friends here. That's how we came here.
Where you're at 5-star, you've got your charge. Real quickly about 5-star, you've had a long career in terms of establishing many things as it relates to factoring and commercial finance. What's been the biggest, challenge or surprise, or what's been one of the aha moments in the last 2 years in trying to do what you're doing for 5-star?
I think by and large, the constant challenge that takes on various forms throughout my career has been, because I've always worked within a banking environment, sometimes bigger banks, medium-sized banks, or community banks, as the case may be. It's always a matter of getting buy-in and getting the level of understanding that you need to get things done from the senior management, from senior management as a whole, or your credit committee as a whole. So it's all about educating them, getting their buy-in. That's been probably the constant challenge through every stage of my career in varying degrees. So when you enter into more conservative environments, you have a little bit of an uphill battle to say, look, I'm structuring this in such a way that it's safe and it's good, it's a win-win situation, etc. One of the things that attracted me to 5-Star Bank was their willingness to be flexible in their entrepreneurship. It's owned by local business people, so our CEO is very just pro innovation and willing to listen and willing to entertain a lot of ideas that I've had. So that's been really important to me, and it's not an easy find. So that makes me very happy to be here, and I think that's part of what's successful. But it's always a challenge getting buy-in from people that are
sure
structures.
One of the things that I enjoyed about the bank environment when I was in bank environment was even amongst the asset-based lending and the factoring groups, the methodology of watching your assets, the classified or criticized assets, the capital requirement of the bank. I enjoy having that level of oversight. Now, I know it sounds crazy, right? Because you want to be able to do what you want to do and come on, we know what we're talking about, leave us alone. And yet at the same time, it was always good to have to, I don't know what the right term is, but in a sense, justify your position, to really think through, are we doing the right thing on this asset, whether it be a new transaction or an existing portfolio customer. Enjoy is probably the wrong thing. I didn't enjoy it, but I really respected that angle. And that's I'm not going to say that's a burden, but that's certainly a concentration that you and those in your world have to deal with versus people in my world where today anyway, we're unregulated. Do you enjoy that? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Is it a pain in the rear? Is it not a pain?
I actually like it. And it has to do with my background. Like I said, I do come from really big banks. So this to me feels very free. It feels very flexible. And I do take comfort in that because I lived through and I worked through the financial crisis in Greece. I don't think a lot of people here have seen how sad that can be and how I'm just a firm believer, I will tell you, in knowing that you won't lose money if you're properly structuring and monitoring something. So it's all about proper structure, proper monitoring. It's when people take their eye off the ball. It's when people become a little complacent or they become a little comfortable or they want to cut corners. Of course, you want to bend over backwards for customers and provide quick service, but at the end of the day, I take a lot of comfort by having the best legal advice possible and also having a credit committee that I know is also double and triple looking at everything I'm bringing in. So it was different. So it was my first conference. I think it was a lot of people's first conference since COVID. It was very disappointing. Obviously, that was the least of what was disappointing, but having that big of a break between conferences was also not very nice. It was just great. I think they picked a great venue. I loved that a lot of it was outdoors. And in the beginning, I was a little bit nervous about the round table, but like I said, with Eric's help and Terry and Heather were there as well. And of course, our sponsor who brought the bar, I very quickly did not feel nervous anymore. It was very much an exchange of ideas. So that was great. I think there were some issues that were a little bit more polarizing than others. But I like that we weren't afraid to go there and we just opened up all of the topics that we believed were interesting. And we got a lot of lively discussion from it. And I think that's really the value of the conference is learning from other people's best practices, but also from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
So
some of the polarizing issues, right? Were you surprised by the polarizing issues at all, or was it pretty much kind of what you thought might be the case?
Yeah, I don't think I had thought about it initially very much. It did surprise me when it happened, just because it was all very fun, and then it just became a little tension. There was a little bit of tension, and I think that had to do with some COVID-related issues or vaccination issues, which are generally very have passionate and strong opinions both ways. So, and like I said, it was a very constructive exchange of opinions. So that was great. And wherever you can have disagreements and people voicing different opinions, it's very constructive.
I think one of the things, and I want to be cognizant of your time, that I really admire and respect, right? So obviously on the reporting part, nobody saw this because we didn't talk about this. But before we talked, before we recorded, I said, hey, one of the things I want to ask about is, what do you feel about the spread of our industry is? And I love your spirit when you say, well, okay, we'll talk about that, but I also want to talk about the opportunities. And I really think that's so indicative of your perspective. So talk to me about, maybe from the round table, but what did you feel, or what did you learn, or what do you think is one of our biggest threats in our industry, and how might that translate to an opportunity, or an opportunity completely separated from this one?
Yeah, and I think I have two that are both. Like I said, I feel like they're both two sides of the same coin. So one of the most prevalent challenges that I heard was retention of good talent, acquisition of good talent. There was a lot of discussion about remote versus on-premise working. I feel like my takeaway from the roundtable was that a lot of people had leveraged that tragedy to be able to establish much more functional remote working strategies, and you see a lot of that in the industry, and a lot of companies has benefited from that. Of course, you had others that had more preference one way or another, but there's a lot of cost saving. There's actually an increase in productivity associated with some people being allowed to be remote. So that was very eye-opening for me. I think by and large, technology was a huge takeaway from this, from the roundtable, but also coming out of the pandemic and the crisis. You saw, obviously, the factoring industry. There was nobody who had a really fun time, unless they were like in transportation or something, in which case it was pretty much almost a windfall for those people. But by and large, you had like low utilization, large deposits. I think a lot of change that was happening anyway in technology was just accelerated that much more. So I believe that's both a challenge and an opportunity. And I think that companies that are embracing those developments and those changes, the remote working opportunities, the new technology that's allowing them to create new products. We heard a lot about that. Those are companies that I believe will be able to take advantage of these positive tendencies that are happening in the market. It really feels to me like that is the direction that the market is moving towards, that people are wanting greater automation. Not that they're not wanting the human service anymore, but I believe that there is a tendency for the creation of new products, streamlining on the payables and on the receivables side. I think we're going to see a lot of that. And I think that, companies that are open-minded and willing to look at these different solutions are going to benefit.
Sure. I think something interesting too, that, I think many of us years ago thought this was a threat, and yet there was a lot of talk about this threat may actually be an opportunity with regard to disclosure and regulation. And, the school of thought that feels like it might be true, and I don't know, is that we know regulation's coming. The question is when. And so why don't we try to have a voice in that regulation versus opposing it over? And I think it's a smart move. And I also, frankly, just from a perspective of transparency, I'm not afraid of disclosing what the fees are from a transaction perspective, because I think it makes sense to talk about what it is that I'm going to charge in order to provide the opportunity for you. Now, many will disagree, I'm sure. Frankly, sometimes I disagree with myself tomorrow morning. This is not right. Do you have an opinion about regulation and disclosure?
Yeah, I actually do. And again, this is very much affected by my experience in Europe. And in Europe, every European country has a factoring law, so it's much more regulated. You have the international rules that govern factoring, the GRIS that we don't have here really. And here we have UCC law. So I do believe that regulation protects people who have best practices. It helps protect best practices per se. Of course, you don't want overregulation, and my experience is one of overregulation, especially the Greek market.
Really? Okay.
But I do believe that it makes it safer, it legitimizes it, it protects it from other, for example, we saw the MCA movement, and we've always had experience with clients struggling to get out of those types of structures. So I believe that it protects everybody involved to the extent that it's not excessive.
Sure. Well, we could probably talk about opportunities and threats all day long. We joked earlier about the strengths and the weaknesses.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm a little biased about the value of this industry and how it serves people and how it benefits people. So let's close. Do you have a favorite client story or a favorite story over the years of being in factoring, asset-based lending, commercial finance that resonates with you?
Well, I have a couple, and I won't go through all of them, but I will say I think the most rewarding thing, and I have a number of clients that are local here in Denver, but also from my past that were just people working out of their garages or out of their home offices, and not even having any outstanding receivables, and just having a really good business plan and some nice customer relationships with some creditworthy companies. And a lot of these companies are now kind of key commercial banking clients that have followed me throughout my banking career, and also some colleagues of mine. I think that growth story is the most rewarding one, where you see companies able to access those opportunities without having to give up equity, without having to bring in investors. Those are the stories that I love, and those are probably the primary reason why I love what I do so much. So.
Those success stories, and they're probably more than that of what we even realize in our industry, where just as you said, it started with virtually nothing in a garage. Well, now they're commercial bank clients, not even factoring or asset-based lending, but they've succeeded such. And how cool is it that you've had the opportunity to touch those people and still to this day to be able to be connected with them. It's a testament, to your career and what you do.
And to what we do. I mean, to factoring in general, I think it's amazing. And I think, there's also other products that are up and coming that we'll see a lot of benefit from going forward. But there's just, that's what factoring was built for, really. And it's fun. It's a fun industry to be in.
Well, Tia Kavas, I'm going to come back to you, I'm sure, in the future and ask you to opine again in another spotlight chat.
Thank you so much for having me.